5 names. 5 companies that all did the exact same forbidden thing this year. They reached into their own history, pulled out a nameplate everyone assumed was buried for good, and rebuilt it as a realistic next-generation concept instead of a nostalgia trinket. Some of these decisions caused actual arguments inside the engineering teams that built them. One of them reportedly got nicknamed the line in the sand internally because of a single drivetrain call that divided the people who built it. We're counting these down from 5 to 1, from the revival that plays it closest to tradition to the one making the boldest, most controversial engineering bet of the entire group. Every spec, every price range, every performance figure you're about to hear is a projected, estimated interpretation based on current industry insight, patent filings, and design analysis, not an official confirmation from any of these manufacturers, and nothing here should be treated as a locked production promise. Stick around, because number 1 on this list might be the hardest car on this entire countdown to argue against. Let's get into it. Number 5. Chevelle just did something nobody at General Motors was supposed to admit out loud. They pulled a name back from the dead, and they didn't ask nostalgia for permission first. This next-generation Chevelle SS is being discussed as a realistic production concept, one that reflects where Chevrolet's performance philosophy appears to be heading. And buried inside its platform sits a drivetrain decision that insiders reportedly debated for years, a decision some engineers apparently pushed back against, one that changes how this car is meant to be driven at the absolute limit. We'll get to that in a moment. First, look at it, because before this thing ever fires up, the proportions are already making an argument of their own. Long hood, short front overhang, a greenhouse tapering rearward like the metal's being pulled backward by something you can't see. This isn't retro cosplay. The quad headlamp signature is a direct inheritance from the 1970 original, but it's been reinterpreted through thin LED architecture that reads as jewelry rather than throwback. The character line running from fender through door isn't decoration either. It's projected to manage airflow separation at the rear haunch the same way the original Chevelle handled it with pure sheet metal instinct, decades before anyone had a wind tunnel to prove it right. The stance sits low and wide, wheels pushed toward the corners in a way that tells you weight distribution was treated as sacred here, not an afterthought bolted on once the styling was locked. The rear haunches swell outward with real physical intent, not just visual muscle, because underneath that bodywork sits a wider rear track engineered specifically to put power down without drama. Even parked at a curb with the engine off, this thing looks like it's already decided which way it wants to turn. Now, the disagreement I promised you. Word is a chunk of the engineering team pushed hard for a dual-clutch transmission, something European, something that would win every drag strip comparison video on paper the moment it launched. Chevrolet is believed to have said no. The Chevelle SS is instead expected to launch with a re-engineered 10-speed automatic paired to a supercharged V8, tuned specifically so the driver feels torque converter shove, that unmistakable American muscle car surge, rather than the clinical snap of a dual-clutch box. It's a compromise, and Chevrolet appears to know it. Some enthusiasts will call that decision old-fashioned. Others will tell you it's the entire point of building a Chevelle in the first place. Estimated output from the supercharged 6.2-liter V8 sits in the range of 850 horsepower, with internally targeted torque figures crossing well past 750 pound-feet. Numbers that would have been unthinkable for a production Chevelle in any previous generation. This isn't presented as a confirmed figure, but industry estimates suggest Chevrolet engineered real headroom into the supercharger sizing. Room to grow without redesigning the block down the road. Open the door and something changes in your posture before you've even sat down. The door itself carries real weight, not artificial heft, the kind of resistance that tells you the structure underneath is doing serious work rather than performing for you. Slide into the seat and you're immediately lower than you expect, wrapped in bolsters shaped around real spine geometry rather than a showroom silhouette. The steering wheel is small by muscle car history standards, flat-bottomed, wrapped in a suede-like material that grips back at your palms under load. The materials avoid the trap so many modern performance interiors fall into. They don't try to convince you they're expensive. They simply behave like they are. Micro-perforated leather, exposed carbon weave that catches ambient light differently depending on where you're sitting, aluminum switchgear with actual mechanical resistance instead of capacitive nothingness. There's a faint scent of leather conditioning and warm electronics, the smell of something recently finished rather than recently unboxed. Close the door, and the cabin goes quiet in a way that feels almost wrong for a car wearing this badge. Acoustic glass and dense door sealing are expected to bring highway wind noise down to luxury Sedan levels, a deliberate decision so the V8 has to earn every decibel it eventually makes. The center display sits angled toward the driver, rather than staring blankly at the windshield, integrated into a dash structure that curves protectively around the cockpit instead of stretching flat like a tablet, bolted to plastic. Technology here exists to disappear into the background of your life rather than announce itself. Adaptive driver assistance is expected to handle long-distance monotony on interstate stretches without removing your hands from the wheel unless you actually ask it to. Over-the-air updates mean the car Chevrolet ships in year one keeps refining itself quietly in your driveway long after purchase. Connectivity is designed around getting you back to the road faster, not trapping you in menus and setting screens. None of it asks you to think about it, which is exactly the point of good technology living inside a car built around driving emotion first. Now start it. There's a half-second of electronic priming before ignition. Then, the V8 catches with a low mechanical cough that rounds instantly into an idle with real physical presence, a chest-level rumble, rather than a dashboard vibration you only notice if you're paying attention. Blip the throttle and the supercharger whine arrives underneath the exhaust note, like a second instrument playing counter-melody, mechanical and slightly menacing. At idle, it settles set into something patient, almost restrained, like it knows it's not being asked for anything yet. Roll into throttle, and the sound builds in layers rather than jumping straight to aggression. Low RPM delivers a deep, chesty growl, supercharged and slightly muffled, exactly what a forced induction American V8 is supposed to sound like. Push past the mid-range, and the exhaust character sharpens, shifting from muscular to genuinely violent, the kind of sound that reorganizes your priorities inside a helmetless cabin. Gear shifts under load land with a firm mechanical thud through the chassis, not harsh, but unmistakably physical, a reminder that torque converter automatics tuned this way still know how to hit hard when asked. At the top of the rev range, the supercharger whine dominates entirely, high and urgent, right before the shift cuts it off like someone closing a door on a thunderstorm mid-sentence. Cabin isolation holds remarkably well through all of this. Road texture and wind noise stay controlled, even as the engine note becomes an event, which is precisely the kind of engineering discipline that separates a car that sounds expensive from a car that just sounds loud. The first few seconds of actual motion tell you everything about the chassis philosophy underneath all that theater. Steering weight builds naturally off-center, rather than arriving artificially heavy from the first degree of input, communicating road surface texture through the wheel rim with a clarity that modern muscle cars have historically lacked. Throttle response feels immediate but not nervous, the kind of calibration that lets you meter power in traffic without lurching, then unleashes everything the moment you actually commit to it. Brake feel carries real initial bite, followed by progressive, trustworthy pressure, engineered around big 6-piston front calipers that are expected to resist fade even after repeated high-speed stops, a detail that matters more on a real mountain road than on any spec sheet. Suspension behavior stays composed over broken pavement, soaking up harshness without going soft, a magnetic ride damping system reportedly tuned to stiffen predictively rather than reactively. Chassis balance under hard cornering feels neutral rather than nose-heavy, a genuine engineering achievement for a car carrying this much V8 weight over the front axle. Seat support holds your torso through lateral loads without needing aggressive bolstering to compensate for a soft cushion, which tells you the geometry was solved correctly the first time rather than patched afterward with foam. Pricing is expected to land in the range of $90,000 to $105,000 depending on configuration, a number that sounds significant until you actually experience what's underneath it. You're not just paying for horsepower here. You're paying for a company willing to argue internally about torque converter character in an era when almost every competitor defaulted to the easiest engineering answer available. You're paying for a badge that disappeared, came back, and refused to come back diluted. This isn't a segment disruptor chasing lap times, and it isn't a nostalgia trinket either. The next generation Chevelle SS is positioned as a modern muscle icon that refuses to apologize for prioritizing feeling over efficiency. Engineered for people who still believe a car should argue with you a little before it agrees to go fast. This is a car built for someone who has already owned the quiet, competent, forgettable version of performance and decided it wasn't enough. Someone who wants a machine with opinions, who reads a torque curve the way other people read a menu. The honest limitation here is real. That 10-speed automatic, wonderful as its torque converter shove feels, will lose outright acceleration numbers to dual-clutch rivals in a straight, sterile drag race. Chevrolet appears to have made peace with that trade, betting that feel matters more than 1/100th of a second on a timing slip, which is either the most romantic engineering decision of this decade or a genuine miscalculation, depending entirely on who you ask. Everyday usability hasn't been forgotten either. Rear seat space is expected to accommodate real adults for genuine trips. The trunk swallows more than its silhouette suggests, and ride comfort on long highway stretches stays composed enough that this could realistically be your only car, not just your weekend one. That's number 5. Number 4, Ford Galaxy 500. The Ford Galaxy 500 name has been dead for over half a century, and that's exactly why this next-generation concept lands like a controversy before anyone's even opened the door. Reviving a nameplate this old is either an act of genius or an act of desperation, depending on who you ask. And before we even get to what's under the hood, there's a decision the engineering team made that's going to split this audience straight down the middle. It involves the transmission, and it's the kind of choice that either proves this car understands its own soul or completely betrays it. Let's start with what you see, because before this engine ever turns over, the proportions are already talking to you. The stance is wide, low, and planted in a way that feels aggressive without feeling nervous. The hood is long, sculpted with intakes that aren't decoration, they're function, feeding a chassis that clearly wants to breathe. The fastback roofline sweeps backward with a tension that echoes the original Galaxy's full-size American presence, except now it's been compressed, tightened, turned into something closer to a modern grand tourer wearing muscle car clothing. The lighting signature up front is thin, sharp, almost surgical, a deliberate contrast against a face that's otherwise all mass and confidence. Out back, quad exhaust tips sit nestled in a carbon diffuser that tells you this isn't a styling exercise. Someone engineered airflow here. Someone cared about what happens underneath the car, not just what happens on top of it. The wheels are wrapped in rubber that looks like it was chosen for grip first and vanity second, and the fender flares pull outward just enough to hint that there's real width to the rear axle, real width to whatever's about to make this thing move. Now here's the transmission decision I teased earlier. Word is the internal engineering targets emphasize a dual-clutch setup, but there's been real debate about whether Ford should have kept a traditional automatic here for the sake of long-distance comfort and cost control. A dual clutch means faster shifts and a more connected, more aggressive personality. It also means a stiffer, more mechanical low-speed experience that isn't for everyone. This is the compromise baked into the car's DNA, and it's a legitimate one. Some enthusiasts are going to love the rawness. Others are going to wish for something smoother in daily traffic. Both reactions are fair, and neither side is wrong. Underneath that long hood, industry estimates an engineering direction point toward a supercharged V8, projected somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 horsepower, paired with a chassis tuned for rear-wheel drive theater rather than all-wheel drive safety nets. That number isn't confirmed, but it's believable for a car wearing this kind of proportion and this kind of ambition. And that horsepower figure means nothing until you hear what it sounds like waking up. Turn the key, or more accurately, press the start button, and there's a beat of silence before the starter catches, like the car is gathering itself. Then the V8 fires with a deep chest-level thump, uneven for a half second, before settling into an idle that isn't polite. It's a rolling, muscular lope, the kind of idle that vibrates through the seat and into your spine. Roll into the throttle, and the exhaust note doesn't scream. It grows, thickening into a low, violent roar that feels less like noise and more like weight pressing against your eardrums. The supercharger whine layers on top, a mechanical whistle cutting through the bass. Upshifts land with a sharp metallic crack, the dual clutch snapping through gears fast enough that the engine barely has time to exhale before the next gear grabs. Push it toward the red line, and the whole cabin seems to compress around you, sound and vibration merging into something closer to a physical sensation than an auditory one. And yet, lift off the throttle in cruise mode, and the cabin isolation is genuinely impressive. Wind noise suppressed, road texture filtered into a distant hum rather than an intrusion. Open the door and the first thing you notice is the weight of it. Substantial, engineered, not tinny. The seating position drops you low and wraps you in bolstering that's supportive without ever feeling clinical. The steering wheel is thick-rimmed, finished in a leather that has just enough texture to remind your hands. This is a performance car, not a luxury cruiser pretending to be one. There's a scent inside, leather and something faintly metallic, like the smell of a workshop that's been cleaned but never fully erased. Ambient lighting traces the door panels and dash in a warm amber glow that shifts subtly depending on drive mode, quietly reinforcing the car's mood without shouting about it. The infotainment display is integrated into the dash rather than bolted on top of it, a deliberate design philosophy that treats technology as part of the architecture instead of an afterthought. Stitching on the seats is deliberate, quilted, the kind of detail that tells you somebody in a design studio actually cared whether your thumb noticed the difference between good leather and great leather. The technology inside is there to support you, not to overwhelm you. Adaptive driver assistance systems, over-the-air update capability, and connectivity features are all present, engineered to quietly reduce friction in daily life rather than to dazzle you with screens. Autonomous support features step in during highway monotony, so your attention stays fresh for the moments that actually matter. And safety systems work in the background, watching without hovering over every input you make. Now let's talk about actually driving it. The steering is quick without being twitchy, weighted in a way that communicates road surface honestly rather than filtering it into vagueness. Throttle response is immediate, almost eager, the kind of pedal that rewards a light touch just as much as a heavy one. Braking feel is firm and progressive, confidence-inspiring rather than grabby. The suspension, tuned toward a firmer performance character, transmits road texture. With clarity, you feel the pavement change beneath you. Though this firmness is the honest trade-off for the chassis control that makes the car feel so composed under hard cornering. Long-distance comfort takes a slight hit for that decision, a subtle but real limitation worth acknowledging upfront rather than glossing over. Chassis balance leans toward neutral with a hint of rear bias, the kind of setup that rewards a driver who understands weight transfer rather than one who simply mashes the pedal. In the first few seconds of acceleration, the seat holds you firmly as the car surges forward with a shove that feels mechanical and honest, not synthetic. Pricing is expected to land in the mid-$60,000 to low $70,000 range, positioned as a genuine performance proposition rather than a luxury flex. And here's the real question: is it worth that money? The honest answer is yes, but not because of the horsepower number or the carbon fiber trim. You're paying for a piece of American automotive identity that's been resurrected with real engineering intent behind it, not just nostalgia slapped onto a modern platform. You're paying for a driving experience that prioritizes feeling over spec-sheet bragging rights. Where does this car sit in the landscape? It's not chasing supercar numbers, and it's not trying to be a luxury flagship either. This is positioned as a modern muscle icon with genuine grand touring ambition, aimed at redefining what a resurrected American nameplate can feel like in this era. It's built for someone who still believes driving should feel like a conversation between man and machine, someone who values the sound of an engine as much as the number on a spec sheet. That's number 4. Number 3, Chevrolet Bel Air. Chevrolet has never done this before, and that alone should worry every muscle car built in the last decade. Not a facelift, not a retro-themed trim package, a nameplate that Chevrolet quietly retired from cultural memory resurrected here as a realistic next-generation interpretation, engineered as if the company had spent 70 years refusing to let the idea die. Before we get anywhere near horsepower numbers, there's a decision buried in this car's chassis that is going to divide people the moment they understand it. Because Chevrolet's projected engineering team appears to have chosen a drivetrain philosophy that trades a small piece of straight-line supremacy for something almost nobody expects from a Bel Air. We'll get there, but first you need to understand what this car is trying to say before it ever says a word through its exhaust. Look at the proportion of that hood. It stretches longer than modern design language typically allows, and that's not an accident of nostalgia. It's a projected statement of intent. The long hood, low belt line, and gently sloped fastback roofline are engineered to communicate confidence without aggression, the way the original Bel Air never needed a wing or a splitter to look important. And yet here, the design philosophy doesn't ignore modern aerodynamic reality. The front fascia integrates a functional carbon splitter and hidden brake ducting into a shape that still reads as Chrome-era elegance, which is a genuinely difficult needle to thread. The rear haunches widen just enough to hint at the width of rubber underneath, without becoming cartoonish, and the taillight signature, a single illuminated bar stretching the width of the car, is a projected design cue meant to modernize the vertical taillights of the original without losing their emotional rhythm. Every line on this car is arguing that heritage and forward motion are not opposites. That's the thesis. Whether you agree with it is part of the fun. Open the door and the argument continues somewhere quieter. The door itself closes with a weight that feels engineered rather than dampened, a deliberate low-frequency thud that Chevrolet's projected NVH targets seem built around, communicating structural seriousness before you've touched a single control. The cabin smells like leather that was tanned slowly, not sprayed with a synthetic approximation of luxury. Seating position is lower than you'd expect from something wearing this much sheet metal, hips settled into a bolstered bucket that holds you the way a proper driver's seat should, not the way a lounge chair does. The steering wheel is thinner rimmed than modern performance cars typically offer, a projected callback to analog feel, wrapped in leather that's been perforated just enough to feel alive under your palms. The instrument cluster blends into the dash rather than interrupting it, a digital display housed behind glass that mimics the shape of the original round gauges without abandoning modern clarity. Ambient lighting is warm rather than clinical, amber undertones instead of the cold blue that so many modern interiors default to, because this cabin is trying to feel like a living room from 1957 that somehow knows what a processor is. Cabin silence at rest is nearly total, engineered through layered composite insulation in the doors and floor, so that when you finally do wake the engine, the contrast hits you physically. And this is where the promise from earlier gets paid off, because the engineering decision Chevrolet's projected team made here is not what muscle car loyalists expect. Instead of chasing the highest possible horsepower ceiling through a monstrous supercharged displacement, the Bel Air's estimated architecture centers on a twin-turbocharged small-block V8, projected in the 850 to 900 horsepower range, paired with a hybrid-assisted electric motor integrated into the transmission housing for immediate low-end torque fill. It's a compromise, and Chevrolet knows it. Purists will say a Bel Air revival deserves a screaming supercharger whine, not a turbocharged hybrid heart. But the projected engineering logic makes sense once you understand the goal: drivability across a genuinely wide range of conditions, from effortless boulevard cruising to a genuine 3-second sprint to 60, without the compromises that come from an engine built purely to dominate. A drag strip start of behavior is deliberately theatrical but restrained. A brief electric hum precedes ignition. Then the V8 catches with a low, guttural cough before settling into an idle that feels deep and unhurried, more baritone than tenor, a sound engineered to communicate mass rather than aggression. Throttle response builds progressively rather than violently, the turbo spooling with an audible rush that layers underneath the mechanical growl of the block itself. At full acceleration, the exhaust note sharpens into something urgent without ever becoming shrill, a sound that feels physically wide, like it's coming from the entire rear of the car rather than a pair of pipes. Gear shifts through the projected 10-speed automatic land, with a firm mechanical snap during aggressive driving, then disappear into near invisibility during relaxed cruising. At the top of the rev range, there's a genuine emotional payoff, a hard-edged snarl that feels earned rather than manufactured. The kind of sound that makes your chest tighten slightly, even when you know it's coming. The first moments of actual motion tell you everything the specification sheet can't. Steering weight is deliberately heavier than most modern performance sedans, a projected calibration choice meant to make the car feel substantial and intentional rather than nervous. Throttle response in normal driving modes is smooth and linear, but there's a noticeable eagerness underneath it, like the car is waiting for permission rather than restraint. Brake feedback is firm from the very top of pedal travel, communicating confidence immediately rather than requiring you to dig for it. The suspension, a projected adaptive setup built around double wishbones up front, manages to filter out harsh impacts while still transmitting genuine road texture, so you feel the asphalt without being punished by it. Chassis balance under quick direction changes feels neutral and composed, not floaty the way a car this size might suggest, and the seats hold you through it, with bolstering that tightens just enough during hard cornering to feel intentional rather than incidental. Underneath all of that theater sits a layer of quiet intelligence that most drivers will only notice when they need it. Adaptive driver assistance systems work to reduce fatigue on long highway stretches without ever feeling like they're taking the car away from you. And over-the-air update capability means the car's behavior can continue to be refined long after it leaves the dealership, a modern reassurance layered underneath a distinctly analog driving experience. Connectivity and safety systems exist in the background, present when needed, invisible when not, which is exactly how technology should behave in a car, built around emotional connection to driving rather than screens. Estimated pricing for the Bel Air is projected to land somewhere in the neighborhood of $90,000 to $105,000, depending on configuration, positioning it well above typical muscle car territory and closer to genuine luxury performance grand tourers. That number invites an honest question, and the honest answer is that you're not just paying for horsepower here. You're paying for a piece of American design language that Chevrolet allowed to disappear and has now rebuilt with real engineering conviction rather than empty retro styling cues. You're paying for a cabin that feels handcrafted, a drivetrain philosophy that prioritizes real-world usability over spec-sheet bragging rights, and a nameplate that carries genuine cultural weight in American automotive history. Positioned within the current landscape, this isn't a straightforward muscle car revival, and it isn't a luxury flagship either. It exists in a space that's genuinely difficult to categorize, a modern American grand tourer wearing the emotional skin of a 1950s icon, aimed at buyers who want something with more soul than a modern muscle coupe, and more personality than a German luxury sedan. The person this car is built for isn't chasing quarter-mile bragging rights. There's someone who understands that a car can be a statement of patience and taste rather than aggression. Ride comfort over long distances benefits directly from that same suspension tuning that handles spirited driving. And rear seat space, while not enormous, remains genuinely usable for real passengers rather than existing purely as a styling formality. Cargo capacity is respectable for the segment, enough for a real weekend trip, which matters more than most muscle car buyers admit, until they actually try to pack for one. That's number 3. Number 2. Corvette. Zora Chevrolet has spent 70 years trying to build a car that could stand next to Modena and Maranello without flinching, and every time they got close, something held them back. This time, something didn't hold back. What you're about to hear is the story of a machine that internal engineers reportedly nicknamed the line in the sand, because somewhere in its development, Chevrolet made one drivetrain decision so unexpected that it forced longtime Corvette loyalists to sit down and reconsider what this badge is even allowed to be. Before we get to that decision, understand what you're looking at. The next generation Corvette Zora is being discussed across the industry as a realistic future production concept, an evolution of the mid-engine platform that GM introduced with the C8 and pushed further with the E-Ray and ZR1. This is not a rumor pieced together from nothing. It's a projection built from patent filings, supplier chatter, and the natural next step of a program that has been building toward this exact moment since the day the engine moved behind the driver's seat. Walk around it and the first thing you notice isn't the width, though it is wider. It's the confidence. The nose sits lower than anything wearing a Corvette badge before it, not for drama, but because every inch of that fascia is reportedly doing aerodynamic work, feeding air toward brake ducts and underbody channels that keep the front end planted at speeds where lesser cars start to float. The daytime running lights carve a signature so sharp it looks machined rather than molded, and that's intentional. This is a design language that wants to be recognized from a half-mile away, at night, in the rain, by someone who has never even sat in one. Move along the flanks and the story changes tone. The side intakes aren't decoration. They're functional architecture, feeding the engine bay and the transmission cooling system in a layout that automotive engineers describe as thermal management, built into the sheet metal itself, rather than bolted on as an afterthought. The stance is aggressive, wide-hipped, planted, and it communicates something specific before you've heard a single cylinder fire. This car was engineered to be driven hard, repeatedly, without flinching, not just photographed once and parked. Here is the open loop I promised you. Chevrolet is expected to pair this platform with a naturally aspirated flat-plane crank V8 architecture, rather than leaning entirely into forced induction. A choice that puts the Zora philosophically closer to a Modena-built V8 than anything Chevrolet has built before. And engineers reportedly debated internally whether that was too big a departure from the supercharged, brute force identity that made Corvette a household name. Step back and look at the rear for a moment. The taillights are narrow, angular, almost weapon-like, and the quad exhaust outlets sit low in a diffuser that's doing real aerodynamic work rather than just looking purposeful. The wing isn't purely cosmetic either. Estimates suggest it's generating meaningful rear downforce at speed, which matters enormously once you understand what kind of engine sits ahead of it. That engine is where the real story lives. Industry estimates suggest the next Zora will be built around a naturally aspirated V8, displacing somewhere in the range, that allows genuinely high revving behavior, supplemented by a hybrid assist system pulled from the E-Ray program, pushing combined output into a projected range between 850 and 1,000 horsepower. That hybrid layer isn't there to inflate a spec sheet. It's there to fill the low-end torque gap that naturally aspirated engines always concede to their supercharged siblings, meaning this car is expected to launch with the instant shove of an electric motor, and then hand off to an engine that wants to scream toward a red line well north of what any previous Corvette has offered. Now imagine standing next to it as someone thumbs the starter. There's a half-second of near silence, electric systems waking first, and then the V8 catches with a bark that's tighter and higher pitched than the deep American rumble Corvette owners have known for decades. At idle, it settles into something busy and mechanical, almost race-adjacent, nothing like the lazy burble of a pushrod small block. Roll into the throttle, and the sound doesn't just get louder, it gets sharper, climbing in pitch the way an exotic V8 does, rather than simply growing in volume the way a muscle car typically does. Near redline, it turns almost metallic, urgent, demanding, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten slightly even standing still. Shift under load, and you feel more than hear a mechanical snap through the paddle, aggressive but controlled. And then, drop back to a cruise, close the door, and the cabin goes remarkably quiet. Isolation engineers reportedly targeted specifically so this car can be a daily companion and not just a track toy. Open that door and the first thing that hits you is scent, leather, and something faintly technical, like a cockpit rather than a showroom. The seating position is low, deeply reclined. Your legs stretch toward pedals that feel positioned by someone who actually drives, not just someone drawing a dashboard. The steering wheel is small in diameter and thick in the rim, the kind of wheel that tells you immediately this isn't a car built for comfortable cruising alone. Materials feel dense and expensive. Carbon back trim, Alcantara that grips rather than just decorates, stitching that looks hand-finished rather than stamped. The central display integrates cleanly into the dash rather than looking bolted on. And ambient lighting at night gives the cabin a low, focused glow, like a cockpit preparing for takeoff rather than a car preparing for a commute. Technology here exists to disappear into the background rather than announce itself. Adaptive driver assistance systems are expected to quietly manage long highway stretches, easing fatigue on cross-country runs without ever making the driver feel like a passenger in their own car. Over-the-air updates mean the car theoretically improves after you've already bought it. Connectivity systems sync effortlessly rather than demanding attention. None of it competes with the driving experience. All of it exists to protect the moments when you actually want full control back in your hands. And that moment, the first time you actually move, is where everything you've heard so far gets tested. Roll away, and the steering is immediately alive, quick without being nervous, communicating road texture through your palms in a way that feels almost old-fashioned in its honesty. Throttle response is immediate, no lag, no hesitation, just a direct line between your right foot and the rear wheels. Brake pedal feel is firm and progressive rather than grabby, the kind of feedback that lets you trail brake into a corner with real confidence. The chassis balance is what surprises people most. Weight sits low and centered, and the car rotates into corners with a neutrality that longtime Corvette owners describe as genuinely unfamiliar in the best possible way. Seats hold you through lateral loads without ever feeling restrictive. And somewhere around the third corner of your first real drive, you understand exactly why Chevrolet made that flat plane crank decision. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about building a car that could genuinely trade blows with cars costing twice as much. That's also the honest compromise worth naming. A naturally aspirated, high-revving V8 paired with hybrid assist is more mechanically complex, more expensive to service, and less forgiving of neglect than the traditional supercharged pushrod formula Corvette buyers have trusted for generations. It's a car that rewards attentive ownership and punishes the complacent, and that alone will push some traditionalists toward the simpler ZR1 instead. Pricing is expected to land in a range that positions this car meaningfully above the outgoing ZR1, likely into the mid to high $100,000 territory once options are factored in. A number that sounds significant until you consider what buyers are actually paying for. They aren't just paying for horsepower. They're paying for a genuinely American interpretation of exotic engineering. For a nameplate that spent 7 decades earning the right to be taken seriously on this stage. This car occupies a strange and fascinating position in the current automotive landscape. It's not simply the next Corvette. It's positioned as a genuine American answer to naturally aspirated exotic engineering, aimed at redefining what a mid-engine flagship built in Kentucky is capable of, without ever pretending to chase a European badge. That's number 2, Nubier 1. Chrysler 300 Snowbody at Chrysler expected the loudest reaction to come from a color. Not a horsepower figure, not a grille, a color. A cool mineral seafoam green that looks almost calm in the showroom light and almost furious the moment it starts moving. And that contradiction is exactly the point of the car taking the top spot on this list. Before we get anywhere near the engine, there's a decision buried in this chassis that Chrysler's engineers reportedly fought over internally. A decision about how big this car should be allowed to feel from behind the wheel, and it changes everything about how this thing drives. We'll get there. For a long time, the story of the 300 was simple. American size, American presence, a big rear-drive sedan that looked like it belonged outside a courthouse or a nightclub, depending on the decade. That silhouette became shorthand for a certain kind of confidence, and it never fully left the cultural bloodstream, even after the nameplate went quiet. What Chrysler appears to be engineering now is not a retreat into nostalgia. It's a next-generation interpretation, a projected production concept built from the emotional memory of the original 300 and stretched into a modern, wider, lower stance without losing the thing that made people stop and look in the first place. The proportions here are longer in the hood than you'd expect from a modern flagship, a deliberate callback to a front-engine, rear-drive layout that still communicates old-world weight distribution, even in an era leaning toward electrification. The stance is the first thing your body reacts to before your brain catches up. Wide fenders push outward with real muscle, not decorative flares, and they sit low enough over the wheels that the whole car reads as planted rather than tall. That width isn't vanity. It's Chrysler engineering, a visual promise about lateral grip before you've even opened the door. The greenhouse is compressed, the roofline drops toward the rear in a fastback adjacent taper, and the beltline rises just enough to make the glass feel like a slit rather than a window, an old muscle sedan trick reinterpreted with modern proportions. Lighting signatures do a lot of emotional work here too. The front daytime running elements sit low and thin, almost predatory, while the rear light bar reads as one continuous ribbon of red rather than two separate housings, a signature meant to make the car identifiable in a single glance on a dark street. Aerodynamic elements, a deep front splitter, functional hood venting, and a subtle rear lip are framed as internally targeted efficiency aids rather than pure styling, believed to trim lift at sustained highway speed without turning the car into a track special it was never meant to be. The wheel and tire package fills the arch aggressively, bronze-toned forged construction paired with a polished lip, communicating a kind of quiet, expensive confidence rather than shouting for attention. Open the door and the first thing you notice is silence. The particular kind of silence that comes from a door seal engineered rather than assumed. The seating position drops you slightly lower than a typical sedan, hip point closer to the floor, which immediately reframes this as a driver's car rather than a chauffeur's car, even though rear passengers are clearly not an afterthought. The steering wheel is thick-rimmed, flat-bottomed, wrapped in leather with a texture that feels hand-finished rather than molded, and the way it sits in your palms suggests a car that expects you to actually steer it rather than simply guide it. Material choices lean into contrast. Dark leather offset by cool-toned stitching that echoes the exterior paint, a detail that feels intentional rather than coincidental, like the cabin and the body were designed by people talking to each other. There's a faint scent of leather and something like warm electronics, the smell of a cabin that's been engineered as a sealed environment rather than a shell with seats bolted in. Ambient lighting stays low and indirect, tracing door panels and the lower dash in a way that never competes with your eyes at night. The central display integrates into the dash rather than perching on top of it, a deliberate choice believed to prioritize a clean sightline over screen size for its own sake. Underneath that hood is where the emotional identity of the car gets decided, and Chrysler appears to have made a choice that will divide people. Rather than chasing the highest number on a spec sheet, engineering priorities here are believed to center on a twin turbocharged V8 architecture. Projected output in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 horsepower depending on trim, paired with a rear-biased all-wheel drive system that sends the majority of torque to the back wheels until traction demands otherwise. That's the controversial part. A segment of the audience wanted a bigger number, wanted this to be a shouting match with the fastest muscle coupes in America. Chrysler instead is estimated to be targeting drivability, a car meant to be lived with daily and unleashed occasionally, rather than a car that's only interesting at 9/10, not parm, is deliberate. A half second of silence before the 8 cylinders catch, and then a low, wide idle that settles into a rhythm you feel through the seat more than you hear through the glass. Roll into the throttle gently and the exhaust stays composed, almost conversational. Push past half throttle and the tone sharpens into something genuinely muscular, a deep chesty pull that thickens as the turbos spool, rather than the abrupt bark of a naturally aspirated engine. Full throttle unlocks a violent, layered roar, aggressive without becoming cartoonish, and the quad exhaust outlets are believed to be tuned to avoid the droning resonance that's haunted turbocharged V8s in the past. Gear shifts from the estimated 8-speed automatic land with a firm, mechanical thud under hard acceleration, softening into near invisibility during relaxed cruising. Cabin isolation is excellent at a steady highway pace, wind and road noise scrubbed away almost entirely, which makes the character switch under hard acceleration feel even more dramatic by contrast. Near the top of the rev range, there's a genuine emotional spike, a rawness that reminds you, this is still fundamentally an American V8 wearing modern turbocharging, rather than a synthetic imitation of one. The first few seconds of actual motion tell you almost everything about this car's soul. Steering weight builds naturally off-center, communicative without being nervous, and there's a directness to initial turn-in that feels surprising in a sedan this size. Throttle response is immediate once past the initial turbo lag, which is present but brief, and that lag itself is the one honest compromise here. A small hesitation before full boost arrives that keeps this from feeling as instantaneous as a naturally aspirated engine. A trade Chrysler appears to have accepted for the low-end torque richness that follows. Brake pedal feel is firm and progressive rather than grabby, giving you confidence to trail brake into a corner without drama. Suspension behavior favors compliance over harshness, soaking up broken pavement while still tightening up convincingly the moment you load the chassis through a bend. Chassis balance leans toward neutral, with just enough rear bias to let you feel the car rotate slightly on corner exit if you ask it to. Your first honest reaction behind the wheel is relief. Relief that a car this visually aggressive hasn't sacrificed everyday comfort to get there. Technology here is framed around making your life easier rather than impressing you with jargon. Driver assistance systems handle long highway stretches with a light, reassuring touch rather than an intrusive one. Adaptive cruise and lane centering, working together so quietly you sometimes forget they're active. Over-the-air updates mean the car is expected to improve after you buy it, rather than age the day you drive it off the lot. Connectivity integrates your phone almost invisibly, and safety systems are tuned to intervene late and gently, rather than constantly second-guessing a competent driver. Pricing is expected to land in the neighborhood of the mid to high $60,000 range for a well-equipped trim, positioning it well below exotic Grand Tours but firmly above mainstream full-size sedans. Sitting in this car, feeling the way the cabin isolates you, and the way the chassis actually rewards a good driver rather than just a confident one, the money feels like it's buying craftsmanship and character, rather than just a nameplate people vaguely remember. You're not just paying for a car, you're paying for a piece of American design language that refused to disappear quietly. This isn't a segment disruptor chasing headlines, and it isn't purely a legacy revival trading only on memory. It sits somewhere more interesting, a modern muscle sedan attempting to prove that presence and precision aren't mutually exclusive. The person this car was built for isn't chasing a stoplight reputation. It's someone who wants a car that feels substantial in daily traffic and genuinely alive the moment the road opens up. Someone who values a tactile, mechanical connection to driving as much as they value comfort. That's number one. Out 5 nameplates. 5 companies betting that history still has commercial and emotional weight in a market drifting toward electrification. Some leaned into forced induction. Some bet everything on hybrid-assisted naturally aspirated engines. One picked torque converter, shove over a dual clutch box out of pure stubborn feeling, and another split the difference and let the argument stay unresolved on purpose. So here's the debate I want in the comments. Does a legacy nameplate earn the right to return wearing a completely different engineering philosophy than the one that made it famous? Or does true heritage revival demand staying loyal to the original formula no matter what modern engineering makes possible? Tell me where you rank all 5 of these, and if this kind of honest, unhurried breakdown is your thing. Subscribe, because there's a lot more of this coming. None of these cars asked to be the loudest thing in the room. They just want to be the ones you remember leaving. This video is based on current automotive industry insights, publicly available information, market trends, and design analysis available at the time of writing. All specifications, features, pricing, performance figures, production plans, and launch timelines discussed are projected and estimated interpretations, not officially confirmed details, and remain subject to change. Nothing in this video should be considered an official announcement, unless directly confirmed by the respective manufacturers.